June 4th, 1943. Railroad Street, Texas. A pencil trembles in a clerk's hand as he notes the arrival of another trainload. The sound of steel wheels fades into the heavy Texas air, replaced by the sharp scent of diesel and dust. From behind, a line of guards, men in worn gray uniforms, step down, their boots caked with foreign mud, eyes scanning a land that feels nothing like home. These are German prisoners of war, captured on battlefields thousands of miles away. They had once served under a banner that promised triumph and glory, but now they stand quietly under the vast American sun, unsure whether to feel fear, shame, or relief. For the people of Mexia, this is an odd sight. The war in Europe feels distant, a story told through headlines and ration stamps. And yet, here it is, stepping right into their small town. Mothers peek from porches, children whisper, and old men pause at the station fence, watching as soldiers herd the Germans into trucks bound for the new camp just beyond the tree line. The prisoners ride silently. Some stare at the open countryside, astonished at the endless rows of green, the quiet farms, the freedom they can see but cannot touch. Others keep their eyes down, clutching whatever dignity they have left. When the convoy stops, they step into Camp Mexia, rows of wooden barracks behind barbed wire, surrounded by fields shimmering in the Texas heat. To many, it looks almost peaceful. One German murmurs that it feels too kind for a prison. But the Americans have built it with purpose, not as a torture camp, but as a place to keep men alive, fed, and, though they don't know it yet, changed. Inside the wire, life slowly begins to settle. The Germans are issued clean clothes, soap, and meals, more than most of them have seen in years of war. At first, they suspect a trick. It's propaganda, one mutters, but day after day, the food comes, the guards act fair, and the small privileges, mail, books, even a soccer field, start to chip away at the image of the cruel America their leaders described. Across the road, local farmers face a different kind of challenge. The war has drained labor from the fields, sons off to Europe or the Pacific, leaving harvests at risk. So the U.S. Army offers a trade. Prisoners can work. At dawn, trucks carry groups of Germans to cotton fields and sawmills. They labor hard, earning a few cents per day, but also earning something they didn't expect, a strange sense of normalcy. American farmers bring them water, share tobacco, sometimes even talk. At first it's awkward, then curious, then quietly human. In the evenings, the men return behind the wire, tired but thoughtful. The war feels far away now, replaced by the rhythm of work, the hum of crickets, and the faint smell of barbecue drifting from nearby homes. One prisoner, a former architecture student named Eric, begins sketching what he sees. Barns, tractors, sunsets, his drawings spread among the camp, then into town. Local papers print them, calling him the German artist of Mexia. When the guards show him the article, Eric doesn't know whether to laugh or cry. For the first time, he realizes something powerful. The people outside the fence don't hate him. They hate the war, not the men caught inside it. And that realization, though small, begins to spread like a quiet spark through the camp. At night, under the dim light of lanterns, the prisoners talk, not of battle or orders, but of what they see here. Fairness, opportunity, and a kind of freedom their leaders told them didn't exist. Some still cling to the old beliefs, the old pride. Others silently begin to doubt. What none of them know yet is that this small camp in Texas, and dozens like it across America, will do more than just house soldiers. It will reshape minds, break the myth of Nazi superiority, and plant the first fragile seeds of something that might one day be called reconciliation. As the summer of 1943 deepens, the fences stay standing, but the barriers inside begin to fall. The Texas sun burns high above Camp Mexia as weeks blend into months. Routine takes hold. Roll calls, work shifts, evening walks within the wire. But beneath that routine, something unexpected begins to grow. The Americans treat their captives with a kind of measured decency. It confuses the prisoners, especially those raised on the belief that mercy is weakness. They see guards sharing jokes, officers who listen instead of shouting, and rules enforced with order but not cruelty. To men who had been told the world outside Germany was savage and corrupt, this quiet fairness feels unreal. Among them is Karl Mayr, once a loyal Nazi youth leader. His belief in the Reich had been absolute, until now. Assigned to help on a local farm, he works alongside an old American farmer named Mr. Daniels, whose son fights somewhere in Italy. At first, the silence between them is thick. Karl expects hatred, but Daniels simply hands him gloves and says, "Let's get to work." Days pass. They speak little, but gestures replace words. A shared meal under the shade. A jug of water pass between them. Then, one evening, as they rest by a tractor, Daniels mutters, "War makes fools of good men." The words linger with Karl. That night, he can't sleep. For the first time, he wonders if he's been the fool. Back at camp, life feels strangely calm. The men play soccer, attend classes, and even start small orchestras. The Red Cross delivers books and instruments, and the Germans organize themselves like a small village. The guards, observing from towers, often find themselves listening to the faint sound of violins carried on the wind. Letters arrive from home, some joyful, others haunting. Families write of bombings, hunger, and uncertainty. For many, those words shatter the illusion of victory the Nazi propaganda still tries to paint. Eric, the artist, begins sketching. Scenes of camp life, not of war or glory, but of stillness, friendship, and thought. His art captures something fragile and honest, something even the guards admire. One U.S. officer, impressed by his work, says quietly, "You've got talent, son. Use it for something better than hate." That moment becomes a turning point. Eric starts teaching drawing lessons to fellow prisoners, turning the barracks into small studios. The men who once trained for battle now sit quietly with pencils, sketching the light on wooden walls or the curve of a distant hill. Meanwhile, across the country, other POW camps tell similar stories. In Arizona, Louisiana, and Georgia, tens of thousands of captured Germans are living the same paradox. Imprisoned, yet freer in thought than they had ever been back home. Some camps show American films. At first, the Germans scoff, calling them propaganda. But slowly, as they watch stories of struggle, sacrifice, and humanity, they begin to see something different. A nation built not on conquest, but on choice. And as the seasons change, so do they. Not all, of course. A few still salute when the lights go out, whispering oaths to a collapsing Reich. But most begin to drift from ideology to introspection, from blind loyalty to quiet questioning. By late 1944, Camp Mexia hums with an odd mix of order and contentment. The war continues far away, but here, within the fences, time feels suspended. Then one morning, a rumor spreads through the barracks. The Allies have invaded France. The men crowd around the camp bulletin board, reading every word of the posted newspaper. They trace the beaches of Normandy with their eyes, silently calculating the future. Eric sketches the scene. Dozens of soldiers in worn uniforms staring at headlines that might end their empire. For some, the news sparks despair. For others, it brings relief. Perhaps this nightmare is finally nearing its end. As the sun sets that evening, the camp is quiet. The guards watch from their towers as prisoners gather in small groups. Their voices low, their faces unreadable, but deep down, a truth begins to take root among them. A truth they will carry back to their homeland one day. That the strength of a nation isn't measured by how fiercely it conquers, but by how justly it treats even its enemies. Winter settles softly over Texas. The fields beyond Camp Mexia turn pale and still, and a cold wind drifts through the fences. Life inside slows, but never stops. The prisoners have grown accustomed to the rhythm. Work, rest, reflection. The guards, too, have changed. They no longer see enemies behind the wire, just tired young men longing for something normal. Evenings often end around campfires. Some guards share cigarettes or trade stories, carefully at first, then openly. It's strange how laughter can echo through a prison yard. Karl, once the proud Nazi youth, now joins the camp choir. His voice carries through the cold air during Christmas Mass, the same hymn sung by both sides of the war. Across the camp, men stand silent, many in tears. For that one night, the fences disappear in their minds. In a small corner of the camp, Eric works on a mural commissioned by an American officer. It depicts fields, workers, and sunlight breaking through clouds. "You've painted peace," the officer says. Eric smiles faintly. "I've painted what I hope exists," he replies. The following months bring letters, news that Germany is collapsing. Cities reduced to rubble, families scattered, leaders vanishing into bunkers. The war that once promised glory has devoured everything. The men of Camp Mexia read these letters in silence. Pride turns to guilt, guilt to grief. They begin to ask themselves questions once forbidden. Was it worth it? What did we really fight for? Eric writes in his journal, "I used to believe we were destined to lead the world. But here, behind these wires, I've learned more about freedom than I ever did under our flag." The guards never see the journal, but the change in his eyes says enough. Spring 1945 arrives with restless energy. Radios buzz in the camp office. Berlin is surrounded. The war is nearly over. That night, thunder rolls across Texas as if echoing the artillery far away. Some men can't sleep. Karl sits by the window, staring out into the storm. "When we go home," he whispers to Eric, "will they even want us?" Eric doesn't answer. He knows the truth. The Germany they left no longer exists. Weeks later, the camp is called to assembly. The commandant reads a short message. "The war in Europe is over." The words hang heavy in the humid air. No cheers, no applause, only the faint sound of wind through the flags. Some men fall to their knees, others stare blankly. Karl feels tears he didn't expect. He looks toward the guard tower and sees the American sentry standing still, hat pressed to his chest in silent respect. For the first time, both sides are free of orders, and both feel the weight of what that means. In the days that follow, preparations begin for repatriation. The prisoners pack their meager belongings, sketches, notebooks, carved trinkets. They exchange addresses, promise to write, even shake hands with their guards. Eric gives the commandant his final painting, a landscape of Camp Mexia at sunrise, golden light spilling across the fence line. On the back, he writes, "We came as enemies, but we leave as men." When the first trucks pull out, the townsfolk gather again along Railroad Street. Children wave, farmers tip their hats. The same people who once whispered fear now offer quiet farewells. As the convoy moves away, the prisoners watch the town fade behind them. A place that, in its ordinary kindness, dismantled the poison of everything they once believed. Erich keeps sketching as the road unrolls ahead, his pencil tracing memories instead of borders. Karl looks out the window and murmurs, "Maybe losing was the only way to win." Neither of them knows what waits in Germany, ruin, suspicion, or a second chance. But both understand something eternal, that even in war, humanity can survive captivity. The fences of Camp Mexia will stand for years, rusting in the wind. But the change that began within them will travel farther than anyone could imagine. Back across an ocean, into hearts and minds desperate for something better than hate. The journey back to Germany is long and uncertain. The trains that once carried men to war now rattle across the ruins of it. Through shattered towns and scorched valleys, the former prisoners peer out at a homeland they barely recognize. Every mile feels heavier. The flags they once saluted have vanished. In their place hang torn banners, foreign emblems, and silence. Smoke still rises from distant cities. Bridges lie broken, rivers clogged with wreckage. When Eric and Karl step off at a small station near Hanover, no one waits for them. The air smells of ash and rain. Fields once filled with crops now lie barren. They make their way on foot through what remains of their villages. Roofs caved in, streets lined with faces that look older than their years. Children stare at the uniforms, not with pride, but fear. Mothers turn away. For the men returning from America, the real war begins now. Not with guns, but with memory. Karl searches for his family's home. He finds only stone and weeds. A neighbor tells him quietly that his parents didn't survive the last winter. There are no tears at first, only emptiness. Later, in the ruins of his house, he kneels and whispers, "All the orders I obeyed, And for what? Eric finds his way to a refugee shelter in Bremen. He trades sketches for food, portraits for shelter. Word spreads of his talent, and soon he's painting again. Not propaganda, but truth. His art shows both ruin and hope, children among rubble, sun breaking through dust. People begin to gather around his drawings at the market, murmuring about the strange softness in them. Something foreign, something they can't quite name. He knows what it is. It's what he learned in Texas. In the years after the war, America launches the Marshall Plan, sending aid to rebuild the very lands it once fought. For men like Eric and Carl, this gesture confirms what they already felt behind those barbed fences, that compassion can outlast vengeance. Carl joins a reconstruction crew. The first building they repair is a school. When the foreman offers him a cigarette, Carl declines. "I've had enough smoke for a lifetime," he says. He spends evenings reading newspapers, learning about democracy, human rights, things that once sounded weak to him. Now they feel like survival itself. Sometimes he dreams of the camp, of long sunsets behind fences, of guards who shared water instead of bullets. In those dreams, he doesn't feel shame, only gratitude. Eric's art earns him an invitation to Berlin. An American cultural officer there recognizes his name. He had once been stationed at Camp Mexia. When they meet, years later, neither wears a uniform. "You kept your promise," the American says, smiling at one of Eric's canvases, a painting of barbed wire melting into morning light. Eric nods. "And you kept yours," he replies. They talk for hours about those strange years. The irony that a war meant to destroy one another ended up teaching both sides what it means to be human. Meanwhile, across Germany, former prisoners tell similar stories. They speak of farms where kindness replaced hatred, of guards who treated them as men instead of monsters. These stories spread quietly, reshaping how their neighbors think of the once-hated enemy. Historians will later call it re-education through decency. But for the men who lived it, it wasn't a policy. It was proof. Proof that ideas can be defeated not only by force, but by fairness. Years later, when the new West Germany rises, many of its leaders, teachers, artists, engineers, are men who once wore the gray uniforms of prisoners in America. Their time behind those fences became the foundation for something new. A Germany that values freedom because it once saw it from the outside. In 1951, Eric holds his first public exhibition in Hamburg. The collection is titled Beyond the Wire. Visitors stand in silence before his largest piece, a Texas sunrise painted entirely from memory. At the opening, a reporter asks him, "Do you forgive them, the Americans?" Eric smiles softly. "They're the reason I can paint this," he says. "So yes, I do." The crowd applauds, not because the war is forgotten, but because it has finally turned into something that can be understood. Years pass. The war fades into textbooks, memorials, and memories that ache like old wounds. But for those who lived it, both captors and captives, it never truly leaves. In the late 1950s, Camp Mexia is almost gone. The wooden barracks have rotted, the fences have fallen. Only the wind remembers the voices that once filled the air. Grass grows where guards once stood watch. The land is quiet again, but beneath the soil lies a story of transformation. Every now and then, an American farmer driving past slows down and remembers the summer when young Germans worked his fields. He recalls how they sweated, laughed, and learned, how they were just boys far from home, and across the ocean, Carl becomes a teacher. He never mentions the uniform he once wore, but his students notice the way he talks about truth and conscience. "Obedience is easy," he tells them one day. "Understanding is harder. Choose the harder path." His students never know where he learned that lesson, but we do. Eric's art travels the world. His paintings appear in galleries across Europe and America. One day, he receives a letter from a museum in Dallas inviting him to display Beyond the Wire, his Texas sunrise, on American soil. He accepts. When he steps off the plane decades after his captivity, the air feels the same, dry, warm, endless. He travels by car down the old roads, past fields of cotton and the quiet towns that once housed the camps. Camp Mexia no longer exists, but a small plaque marks where it stood. It reads, "On this ground stood a World War II prisoner of war camp. Within its fences, enemies learned they were human." Eric stands before it for a long time. Then he kneels, places a hand on the earth, and whispers, "Danke." At his Dallas exhibition, visitors move silently through the hall. One painting shows barbed wire reflecting the sunset like strands of gold. Another shows hands, one German, one American, passing a canteen of water. Beneath it, the title reads, "Mercy." A journalist asks him, "Why do you paint this over and over? The same camp, the same light." Eric smiles gently. "Because that's where my war ended," he says. "Not when the fighting stopped, but when I realized kindness could be stronger than any weapon." The audience applauds. Some cry. Later that night, as he steps outside into the Texas dusk, Eric looks up at the same stars he once saw through the fence. They haven't changed. Only he has. He thinks of Carl, of the guards, of the songs sung on winter nights. He thinks of the moment when hatred began to crumble under the weight of simple decency. For a moment, he closes his eyes, hearing echoes of distant laughter and the faint whistle of trains long gone. The memories aren't bitter. They're soft, like old photographs. In his final years, Eric writes a small note he keeps framed by his bedside. It says, "War taught me fear. Captivity taught me patience. America taught me freedom. Not the kind written in laws, but the kind found in how you treat another soul." When he dies peacefully in his sleep, his paintings remain. Windows into a time when humanity flickered in the unlikeliest of places. And so the story of Camp Mexia endures. Not as a tale of victory or defeat, but as a quiet testament to the power of mercy. Because sometimes, the greatest battles aren't fought with rifles or planes, but within the hearts of men. And sometimes, the truest freedom is found not beyond the fence, but because of it.